Okay. And actually, it's Reid Sexton. I think D'Angela. Yeah, you reversed my Bruce Wayne persona and my Joker persona, but that's okay. No problem. Because anyway, I mean, a year ago, after the Love Sexy symposium, I think almost, casually, D'Angela mentioned that she'd like to do a symposium based on Batman. And, before she had finished saying Batman, I said, "Can I do the B-sides?" And she said, "Sure." So I'm doing the B-sides. Okay, so like a long-playing vinyl record, a 7-inch 45 RPM single has two sides. Unlike an LP, side 2 of which has never been considered less artistically or commercially integral to an album than side 1, a 45's flip side historically was treated as an afterthought to the would-be hit on the front. A supporting player at best, but more often a Hollywood extra to the movie star that was the A-side. During the 1980s, though, the B-side was transformed by Prince. Prince used the B-side in the following ways: to release more material than his record company allowed him to put on albums, to persuade serious fans to pay again for songs they already owned on an LP, as a place to put music that was incompatible either commercially or artistically with the album from which a single was drawn, and as a way of illuminating the A-sides on the reverse of which they appeared. The flip sides of the singles released from Prince's Batman sort of soundtrack, which would be 200 Balloons, Feel You Up, I Love You and Me, and Sex, marked a high point in his creative use of the B-side, not long before vinyl was banished from record stores and the 45, in effect, died. The Batman B-sides show Prince's alternate Gemini face, a joker to the album's Dark Knight. Okay, a little bit of history on the B-side. The history of the B-side is the history of recorded music technology and commerce. The first technology for the mass production of music had no B-side because that technology was printed sheet music, marketed and sold to middle-class families for performance on the pianos in their living rooms and parlors. Ditto the technology that followed, the player piano roll. So this is a player piano playing Scott Joplin's Maple Leaf Rag, and it was the predecessor to any and all home music technologies that we may have had since. Okay, thanks, D'Angela. So no B-side on a player piano roll. You would consume rolls and insert them in your player piano, and they would play a song for you. Ditto for the technology that followed that. Is that what I want? Yeah, this is the pre-recorded wax cylinder, okay, which was playable on the phonograph, invented in 1877 by Thomas Edison. Do you see the wax cylinders in the foreground there? That's what you would purchase, not a player piano roll, because you were a happening type of person on the cutting edge of technology. You would purchase wax cylinders. That first sound recording and reproduction technology had but a single playable side, still no B-side. Starting in 1892, we're getting closer, a German-American named Emil Berliner marketed discs for playing on what he called a gramophone. Made of hard rubber, these discs were 5 inches in diameter and recorded on one side. Double-sided recordings with one selection on each face were introduced by Columbia Records in 1908. in the form of 10-inch shellac discs that spun at 78 revolutions per minute. Okay, knowing a good thing when he saw it, Edison patented his own disc-playing format, the, quote, diamond disc, which was playable only on the Edison disc phonograph. Now, the two sides of a diamond disc, two sides, were marked L and R for left and right. Do you see the L at the end of the serial number then? And that's the R. Okay, so left and right indicating the record's position when filed vertically. Had the diamond disc and its dedicated player become the industry standard, I might be talking today about Prince's R sides, but it was not to be. And yet, more than 4 decades would pass between the introduction of the two-sided record and the birth of the B-side, explicitly labeled as such. Decades dominated by 78 RPM discs, each side of which held about 4 minutes of music. Remarkably, the 45 RPM vinyl record, and for the youngsters here, I'll hold one up. That's what we're talking about, okay? That's a 45, that's a single. It's the If I Was Your Girlfriend single. Shockadelica on the reverse. The single we know and love, 7 inches across with a silver dollar-sized hole in the middle, did not actually appear until 1949, when it was produced by RCA as a rival format to Columbia's 12-inch, 33 RPM long-playing record, or LP, which had appeared the year before. Now, initially, 45s had neither an A nor a B side per se. That is no clear indication of the song the record company aspired to make a hit on radio and in jukeboxes, and the one they considered extraneous, a mere function of the format. That innovation occurred in the 1950s and soon became standard. Still, lest there be any confusion about which side to play and which to ignore, Wall of Sound producer Phil Spector filled his early 60s B-sides with impromptu jams, literal filler. More organic and less cynical was the dynamic of R&B songs, part 1 of which appeared on a single's A-side with part 2 on the flip. For example, Ray Charles's What I Say, parts 1 and 2, the Isley Brothers' Shout, parts 1 and 2, and multiple releases by James Brown, starting in 1964 with Oh Baby Don't You Weep, which is actually based on Mary Don't You Weep, Prince's demo version of which was, of course, released last year. Another convention placed an instrumental version on the side, of the side A song on side B. We're getting to Prince. Eventually, record companies' default setting consisted of placing on the flip side of a hoped-for hit an album cut considered especially uncommercial. One way or another, the supposedly superior side of the disc was obvious, okay? Except when it wasn't. A few songs, including Tequila by the Mexican-American band The Champs, Rod Stewart's Maggie May, and a little bit later, Gloria Gaynor's I Will Survive, actually started as a B-side. They clawed their way onto the air from the back of a would-be hit, which we've long since forgotten. Initially artifacts in their own right, over the course of the 60s, 45 RPM singles decreased in prestige, eventually being downgraded to mere promotional tools, advertisements in a way, for the more remunerative albums from which the singles were drawn. The format hung on, with some intriguing variations along the way, until about 1967. This is when the Beatles released no singles whatsoever from Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, which was arguably the most prestigious record album, not the best, of all time up to that point. Other artists followed suit, perhaps seeking similar prestige. I don't know if anybody remembers, but when Around the World in a Day was released, initially the plan was for no singles. I think Prince was reaching for that kind of prestige. I also am pretty sure that Warner Brothers interceded because eventually there were 3 or 4 singles released from the album. Okay. By the mid-1970s, the 45 RPM singles days were clearly numbered. Or were they? Apparently, to paraphrase Mark Twain, rumors of the singles' death had been greatly exaggerated. Before the decade was done, it had been resurrected by two powerful new musical genres, disco and punk. Disco. That's what that means. It means disco. Disco revived the single by birthing a new format altogether, the extended remix or dance mix, because this version of a hit or would-be hit generally lasted far longer than the 7 or so minute capacity of a 45, and because it had to be easily manipulable by dance club DJs, extended remixes of disco songs were pressed on 12-inch records. This format had been test marketed as early as 1970, but the concept of remixing, of course, goes back even farther to the mid-60s in Jamaica. The first 12-inch single that was widely available commercially was Donna Summer's epic Love to Love You Baby in 1975. Okay, punk. Punk helped revive the single thanks to its quick and dirty DIY aesthetic. The belabored craftsmanship that yielded slick, often lifeless LPs by the likes of Fleetwood Mac and the Eagles was a major target of punk's rebellion. Better to write a song quickly, record it on the cheap, and perhaps with the help of an indie label, put it out there. Punk's political bent supported the single as well. Artists wanted to respond to events of the day infinitely faster than the months-long cycle of LP creation, production, and promotion allowed. Thus, the Sex Pistols recorded their bitterly ironic single, God Save the Queen, in March of 1977 and released it in late May in advance of the Queen's Silver Jubilee holiday less than 2 weeks later. Okay, so we've got disco, punk, the 70s, singles. The stage is set for Prince. Starting with the releases from 1999, released in 1982, Prince dedicated the B-sides of his singles almost exclusively to non-album tracks. As eccentric and explicit as Prince was on his LPs, these B-sides went farther, deeper, weirder. To superfans and DJs, at least, they became objects of attention, fascination, and love. And they served the following purposes. First, the B-side of a single provided a container for more music than Warner Brothers allowed him to release on albums. Consider the B-sides from Purple Rain and Around the World in a Day. 17 Days, Erotic City, God, Another Lonely Christmas, She's Always in My Hair, Hello, and Girl. Thank you. If you add for the tears in your eyes, over the course of a little more than a year, you've got an 8-song album's worth of releases, an album that Warner Brothers never would have permitted Prince to put out. So he put the songs on the flip sides of his singles. Very clever. Speaking of clever, as demonstrated by his clever scheme to include a copy of the Musicology album with every ticket to the accompanying tour, each of which was then counted as a sale, thus sending the album into the Billboard Top 5, Prince was by no means immune to commercial considerations. Indeed, he was a canny businessman. Including a non-album track on the flip side of a single encouraged fans to repurchase a song they already owned, thus improving that song's sales figures and chart position. And on the right, we have my copy of Let's Go Crazy in Erotic City from Disco Mat in downtown Philly. Looks like it cost me $1.99. Okay, third, the presence of songs with sexually explicit lyrics on an album, especially an album conceived as a commercial blockbuster, may have been considered problematic by Warner Brothers, by Prince himself. As of 1985, including such songs would have garnered a Recording Industry Association of America, quote, explicit lyrics, parental advisory sticker. This in turn prevented some retailers, including Walmart, from stocking such an album. Prince's ingenious solution? Put the naughty songs on the B-sides of the singles, which were rarely, if ever, provided with parental advisory stickers. Another situation in which Prince released material on B-sides rather than albums was when that material was artistically inconsistent with the album in question. Scarlet Pussy was not a good fit for Love Sexy. So it went on the B-side of I Wish You Heaven. And the last and the most interesting reason why Prince put non-album material on the backside of his hoped-for hits, on occasion, a B-side complements, complicates, or comments on its A-side. Let's talk Batman. How did these princely dynamics play out on, and especially off, the soundtrack under discussion today? First, as ever, B-sides provided more real estate on which to locate more songs. Batman B-sides, and if one includes the scandalous Sex Suite, which I think one should, they amount to just shy of 40 minutes of music that doesn't appear on Batman. An entire additional album, right? Regarding additional revenue and additional chart action, too, anyone with the Batman album, which was literally everyone, okay? I was there. It was 1989. It was not 1999. It was 1989. And people who, my grandmother had one. You just bought it. You had no choice. Anyway, everybody already owned Batdance, Party Man, The Arms of Orion, and Scandalous. Until investing in those singles, though, we did not own 200 Balloons, Feel You Up, I Love You and Me, and Sex. Surely we fans who purchased those 45s for their B-sides helped to make those singles hits. As the potential for an RIAA parental advisory, okay, without a doubt, the appearance on Batman of Feel You Up, I Love You and Me, and or Sex would have earned the album a sticker, thus banning it from many bins. I mean, I promised myself not to come until she does. Then she took both hands, and a liar I was. There's more. I don't really want to be your man. I only want to feel you up. D'Angelo, I participate in these conferences just so I can talk dirty on stage, right? You're aware of that? Okay. Prince, in effect, hid this material on the B-sides of his singles, and Walmart was none the wiser. Interestingly, Prince had cut Feel You Up from the original 3-disc Crystal Ball album, which itself was cut down in favor of the more condensed Sign of the Times, but eventually it found a home on the flip of the Party Man single. 200 Balloons was cut as well, though not by Prince, but by Tim Burton from the Batman movie. Prince resurrected both songs on B-sides. Okay, finally we arrive at aesthetic considerations, choices made by Prince exclusively in the name of art. There's something distinctly jokerish about Feel You Up, which thus makes it a perfect complement to Party Man. Similarly, Sex comments grimly on its A-side, Scandalous, with what certainly sounds like a warning about HIV and AIDS. Has anybody listened to this song Sex recently? You have to go to YouTube, or I guess maybe you have the vinyl, because it's not on any disc. S is for scandalous, E is for exciting, X is for adults only. Let's do something frightening, right? Or anything this dangerous just has to be good. One lover, sex. Two lovers, death. Serious. Okay, my favorite Batman, whoops, sorry, I just lost my text. probably for talking dirty on stage. My favorite Batman A-B pairing, now I mean this conceptually, D'Angela. Anyway, it's The Arms of Orion and, and I Love You in Me, okay? It's a single release that looks at love in a manner that, right, The Arms of Orion, can fairly be termed grandiose, with its B-side constituting one of Prince's most intimate recordings ever. I think it's also one of the prettiest, I Love You and Me. It's like an epic poem backed by a lyric poem, Dante's Divine Comedy and one of Petrarch's sonnets. Okay. Due to the terms of his contract with Warner Brothers, songs from Prince's Batman have been excluded from all subsequent albums, with the exception of the Batdance single on the posthumous collection Prince Forever. And maybe somebody can tell me what it was that enabled that song to be included on that collection, because that hadn't been possible previously. Happily, the agreement, talk about Prince as trickster, seems not to have covered the flip sides, with the result that 3 of the 4 Batman Bs appeared on his 1993 collection, appropriately titled The B-Sides. A final thought. There's no analog in the other arts to the B-side of a single. True, 200 Balloons and Feel You Up, having been cut from the Batman film and Crystal Ball, are something like deleted scenes that are absent from a movie's theatrical release but appear on the director's cut DVD thereafter. What of a song like I Love You and Me, though, which doesn't appear to have been cut from anything at all, which in fact seems to have been created for the explicit purpose of backing The Arms of Orion? For that matter, what about Sex, which vanished altogether after ever so briefly emerging on the B-side of the scandalous Sex Suite, which itself has never reappeared? Speaking of disappearances, the age of the single record, the hand-sized vinyl donut that spun 45 times a minute, lasted just over 40 years. The B-side hung on slightly longer as the 45 metamorphosed into the K-single. That's my collection of K-singles on the left. When you looked around a record store in the mid-1990s, though, and all you could see was compact discs, the B-side was dead. It isn't a flip side if you can't flip it over. Thanks.